which the use of force, we'll pick up right where I left off, there's a lot to read here. Security Council has directed or unauthorized use of force to maintain or restore international peace and security. Neither of those circumstances now exist. Absent one of them, U.S. use of forces against Iraq is unlawful. The authors were specifically referring to Article 51 of the UN Charter on the right to self-defense. Nothing that Iraq has done would call the provisions into effect. The report also states that there is no basis on international law for dramatically expanding the concept of self-defense as advocated in the Bush administration's September 2002 National Security Strategy. To authorize preemptive, really preventive, strikes against states on a potential threat arising from the possession or development of chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons and links to terrorism, such an expansion would be destabilized by the system of the UN Charter restraint on the use of force. Further, there is no claim or publicly disclosed evidence that Iraq is supplying weapons of mass destruction to terrorists. The Bush administration's reliance on the need for the regime change in Iraq as a basis of force is barred by Article 2, Common 4 of the UN Charter, which prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. Thus, the rationales being given to the world, the American public, and the armed forces are illegal on their face. I'm going to give you some links for this copy too. It is important to remember that Saddam Hussein was an important ally during the 1980s, and that many of the weapons that may be faced by our armed forces will bear a Made in the USA label. The issue here is not the evil of Saddam Hussein nor the international community doing nothing, but an illegal march to war by the Bush administration, in addition to the violations of international laws which have been incorporated into the U.S. law. The attack on Iraq is a direct violation of the national laws, as Bush claims that he has the authority to decide whether the U.S. will go to war or not. The U.S. Constitution is very explicit on this point. Only the Congress has the authority to declare war. Article 1, Section 8, Paragraph 11. Congress does not have the right to give that power away or to delegate that power to the President or anyone else. The President, as the Commander-in-Chief, Article 2, Section 2, Paragraph 1, can command the armed forces in times of peace and war, but he does not have the authority to declare war or to determine that a war is to occur, especially if he is engaged in illegal conduct in violation of the Constitution itself or his oath of office. The Constitution spells out very clearly the responsibility of the President and his oath. I do solemnly swear or affirm. Okay. The President also has the primary duty to make sure that the laws be faithfully executed. Above text excerpt and edited from, and I'll give you those other links. Congressional resolution to authorize the use of United States Armed Forces against Iraq. The resolution before us today is not only a good product of haste, it is also a product of presidential hubris. This resolution is breathtaking in its scope and redefines the nature of defense and reinterprets the Constitution to suit the will of the executive branch. It would give the President blanket authority to launch unilateral preemptive attacks on sovereign nations that is perceived to be a threat to the United States. This is an unprecedented and unfounded interpretation of the President's authority under the Constitution, not to mention the fact that it stands the Charter of the United Nations on its head. Senator Robert Byrd of West Virginia remarks made on the U.S. floor of the Senate. Those were things Robert Byrd said. October 11, 2002, the joint resolution to authorize the use of the United States Armed Forces against Iraq. Whereas in 1990, in response to Iraq's war of aggression against illegal occupation of Kuwait, and the United States forged a coalition of nations to liberate Kuwait and its people in order to defend the national security of the United States and enforced United Nations Security Council. We're not going to get into that. Let's just keep going on with the laws. How much time do I have left? Oh, a bit. But I'll post the whole thing right there. It'll be right there. You can read the whole thing going on through there. I just wanted to point out those are specific orders. Now we're going to run over to the bias side of it. The Security Council Resolution 678, in order to achieve implementation of Security Council Resolution 660, 661, all the way, let's see, 665, 666, which I hope is purely coincidental, 667, 669, 670, 674, and 677, Whereas in December 1991, Congress expressed its sense that it support the use of all necessary means to achieve the goals of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 687 as being consistent with the authorization of use of military force against Iraq, Public Law 102-1. Iraq's repression and constitutes a continuing threat to the peace, security, and stabilizing of the Persian Gulf. This is all one part or another of the president's speech, but this is basically the gist of it. These are the national crime or the international crimes that he's committed. Now we're going to run over to the Democratic wing, start poking a little at that, and raise the question of why Congress hasn't done anything really about this. Deception of Congress and the American public, committing a fraud against the United States, making false statements against the United States, war powers resolution, misuse of government funds, improper detention, torture, and other inhumane treatments, anti-torture statute 18 U.S. Code 2340-40A. My eyes could cross over and so could yours if I keep reading these. But under deception of Congress and the American public, or improper detention, torture, and other inhumane treatment, anti-torture statutes. These are just American laws. We're no longer on the international globe. We are right here in this country. The War Crimes Act, the Geneva Convention and Hague Convention, international laws governing the treatment of detainees, which now we've outsourced. We no longer torture them. We hand them over to other countries that do not have torture policies, and we extract that information. The United Nations Convention Against Torture and Cruel and Inhumane Degrading Treatment, international laws governing the treatment of detainees, command responsibility for known illegal acts of subordinates in the military, detainment of material witnesses, retaliating against witnesses and other individuals, obstruction of Congress, whistleblower protection, the Lloyd-La Follette Act, or the anti-gag rule. Yeah, a bit left. I need to speed it up. Leaking and other misuse of, now this is another header, leaking and other misuse of intelligence and other government information, revealing classified information in contravention of federal regulations, Executive Order 12958, Classified Information Non-Disclosure Agreement, statutory prohibitions on leaking information. Under another header, laws governing electronic surveillance, which is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, National Security Act of 1947, the Communications Act of 1934, Stored Communications Act of 1986, and pen registers or trap and trace devices. It's a lot to read. It's a long list. Those are all the laws. The first part was given away for free read by the West Point Academy. They just wanted to point out the United Nations treaty agreements that we've broken, which would put all of the administration, at least the executive branch, at The Hague for a tribunal and inquiry where their penalties could be as much as, who knows, or jail terms, or the penalty of death. During the Nuremberg trials, the first time around, Hitler's army, they were hung. Wasn't very pretty. Just 30 seconds left. You know, finally, everyone says that this law and that law and the other law, America, these are the laws that are being broken, and we're not doing anything about it. Well, I've decided to take a different stand, and I want to start becoming more proactive. And I came home for lunch, and I've been reading through all of this stuff, and that's sort of where I've been. I mean, there's just too much information to absorb. You'd almost need a committee to get together to form a committee to write a book. It'd be worse than the September 11th organization. And the criminality that's occurring. You know, America, we need to make these changes. And to my critics, oh well, I don't care. You want to say that these are laws, and you stand behind the president, and the president breaks laws. That means you're in collusion with a criminal. You're in collusion with a group that otherwise would suppress and advocate violence in order to make their own ends and means come about. The Constitution's quite clear. If you take the time to stop and read it, it's quite clear in how we're supposed to deal with these things. And they made provisions. Our forefathers are a smart group, and they didn't